Good afternoon, everyone. How's it going? Thank you so much for being here today. Welcome to our third luncheon series. Actually, time goes really, really fast, and I really appreciate everyone for joining in our video today. So before we join in and meet our speakers for today, here's a recap of our last interview series with Anand Prasad, who is, the former FDOT secretary as well as the current president for FTBA. Here's some, funny story of what he said about, the stuff that he did before.
A story from childhood. I'm a brown skinned guy, right? Brown colored guy. So, and that's the beauty of it, is that people in DOT staff used to come and complain and said, "Oh my God, you got to know people in high places. You got to be part of the clique. You got to part of the inside group and all that stuff." And I would look at them and say, "Have you looked at me? Do I look like an inside group here?"
So there's everyone. That's Anand, just being Anand. He's a funny guy, and if you missed it, watch the clip and make sure you enjoyed it. It's in our video subscription, and then you can definitely watch it there. So without further ado, I'm gonna introduce our guest speaker for today. It's Maria Lehman. She's probably well known for running the president election on 2021. And fortunately, Dennis got the position on this one, but I'm a big supporter of her. She's going to be running again on the ASCE National President 2022. She is currently the Director of U.S. Infrastructure of GHD and also running a lot of offices before. So without further ado, hey Maria, it's nice to see you today. Thank you for being here.
Hi there. Hey, everybody. So first of all, I know this is Central Florida. I'm going to stand up. You see, homage to Epcot and Figment, my buddy for Imagination.
That's awesome.
And Food and Wine, which I'm like really disappointed. It's kind of a goofy time, and my family and I really enjoy going there. I always love the way they took imagination with engineering and have done some interesting things. I'm going to follow a little bit of the questions and format that I was given and just give you some ideas of how I got to where I am. Right now, I am basically heading up infrastructure, and that's about strategy, and it's about how we're positioning for our future. GHD is an Australian-based firm. It has about 13,000 people worldwide, about a third in Australia, New Zealand, and Asia, about a third in Europe and the Middle East, and about a third in North America. We are across environment, transportation, water, wastewater, facilities, and energy as far as markets. And I joined to basically help with their U.S. operations because they 10 years ago weren't on the Engineering News Record 500. We are now 25th. A lot of that has been through mergers and acquisitions, and they were really running a franchise model. And so there isn't a lot of brand recognition. There isn't a lot of kind of national leadership, it's been a collection of people around the country. And in the last few years, it's kind of moving more towards a corporate structure in the US. So that's kind of what I'm doing. I started in the middle of COVID. I started in May. And so I am still at the speed dating phase of my job where I get with one or two people via Teams several times a day to understand what we're doing, where we're doing our portfolio, what the plans are for the future, and what I can bring with my almost 40 years of experience, both in the public and private sectors, on how we might want to address things moving forward. So that's what I do. I guess if I go back to what's my dream, early on in my career, I started with ASCE in college with a concrete canoe that looked like a concrete canoe. It didn't look like the ones now that look like fiberglass. The 1 year we had it, it cracked and sank, but we had a blast anyway. But I've been involved with ASCE from college on, had a lot of supervisors in my life that really pushed ASCE involvement. And so I got involved with the section, first as a younger member. And at that point, in the early 80s, there there were no younger member. There was a designation, but there was no organization.
Really?
I was one of the founding members of the second council in the country. The first one came out of the Northwest. Second one was the Northeast Regional Younger Members Council. That was a long time ago. We had a lot of fun, got a lot of people connected. And now those people are leading different companies and different agencies around the country. So those friendships made over a keg in a bathtub in a hotel room when we had a conference, right? Because we didn't want to spend the money in a bar.
Broken canoe, right?
Those friendships last to this day. And we've helped each other all along. So it started with ASCE and the younger members. I then started on this local section, in the Buffalo section, went through all the chairs. I'm married to a structural engineer, so I was president when he was president-elect. That was interesting.
Nice.
Anyway, from there went on to be a regional director. At that time, it was a little different structure in the 90s. I came onto the national board representing New York, New Jersey, Puerto Rico, and Eastern Canada. I came on before youngers members became 35. It was changed to 35 while I was on the board. And then past President Chuck Pannoni said that I was behind that because I wanted to be a younger member on the board. I had nothing to do with it, but I was a younger member on the board. I was the second youngest person to make the national board.
Wow.
Have been involved in various things, primarily around public policy,
Okay.
a lot of other things as well, but really trying to understand how we move the civil engineer back into a leadership position and how do we get some of the things we need done, funded, and moving on. That created a dream for me that I really wanted to be able to run an agency at some point in my career, and I aspired to run for president of ASCE.
Wow.
So the one piece I got, I actually ran the New York State Thruway Authority as executive director for about 6 months. I was chief operating officer for 2 years.
Wow,
Went back
okay.
to the private sector, and now my focus is back on ASCE.
Okay.
Um,
So this was 20, 30 years ago, Maria? Sorry to cut you off. Maybe 40.
Almost 40.
Wow. And look at you today, though. I mean, that's. I think you reach it all. That's amazing. I thank you for sharing. Yeah. Okay.
So I got to tell you how it began, and I actually said something in LinkedIn. I know some of you are, follow some of the stuff that I do on LinkedIn. That tends to be where I put more of my professional stuff. But I went to a very blue-collar high school. Only about 10% of the kids that were there went on to college. Most of them either just went right to work or went to trade school. And of that 10% that went, like 90% of us became engineers or scientists because we had a very strong math department. We had a teacher named Tom LaPena that taught calculus and said, I want you to learn the calculus, but it's more important to me that you learn the class motto, which was cogitation and tenacity. So if you're thoughtful and you keep trying, anything you can set your mind to, you can get done. And I actually, use that in my concession posting that, all right, we'll take lessons learned from this last round and let's do it again.
That's awesome.
Went to the University of Buffalo, State University of New York at Buffalo. At that point, you didn't have honors classes, but I did do a couple classes between my junior and senior year in high school to get a couple courses under my belt. You didn't have honors, but I did do that. There was like an early admission and I could have opted in or out, but I wasn't going to give up my senioritis to go to college. So I did very well in school. I was definitely in the top 10. My family background, I'm actually a first generation American.
Oh,
I'm a late
nice.
in life baby. My father was in the the Polish arm of British intelligence during World War II.
Wow.
My parents went through the Middle Eastern theater. My sister and brother were both born in then Palestine, now Israel.
Wow.
Significant. My brother's 14 years older. My sister's 19 years older than I am. And so I had a lot to prove. I had much older parents.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wanted to get on with school and, get out. I actually graduated UB when I was 20. Was married, at 21 and starting my life because, wanted to get on with life. I think that has made a difference in how I've made choices because both my parents, my father built up a whole lot. I mean, he was dirt poor from a very small village in Poland and built up. He was actually a district attorney and a judge before World War II. My mother's father, my grandfather, was also a self-made man, and they lost everything overnight with World War II. So education and family and relationships become the only thing that cannot be taken away from you. And so that was a really hardcore value that I heard all day, every day.
Wow, that's such an amazing story. So you're truly living the American dream. I mean, it's your parents are non-engineers. You're the firstborn engineers, and that's man, what's an inspiration story. And so, despite all that, so where did you start your engineering career? Did you always start in the government sector, or did you start something private? And how did you go for it? Did you love it? Being the firstborn engineer in the family, you kind of take the baton and it's like, hey, here I am. So.
Yep. No, well, my first engineering job was with then Duluth Cather, which is now Parsons Corporation.
Oh, okay.
And I came into the job, and you guys have to understand, I graduated in 81. And in 1981, there was a horrible recession. That was right after the oil crisis. It was a horrible recession, and only 40% of engineers got jobs that year. So I was fully set as things were kind of teeing up for that recession. I took my non-tech electives were all in management, so I could do an MBA in a year after my undergraduate degree because I thought for sure I wasn't going to get a job.
Okay.
I was fortunate enough to get a job, and it was because I was interested in hydrology and hydraulics. The job was at Duluth, and they were doing hydraulics. They were doing, at that point, it was HEC 1 and HEC 2, which is now HEC RAS, for flood insurance studies. And so I show up, and I'm, ready to roll, and, you're 20 and having a great time. At that point, by the way, the drinking age was 18, so we were drinking all through college, having a good time.
Oh, man.
And, there was like 12 of us that were hired within a year, all that were, newly minted graduates. It was a great place to be. But I'll tell you what, my first 3 days of school, I was given our contract. It was a FEMA contract. So it was a federal contract. It was 3 volumes that were about 6 inches deep. And I was told to read it.
Wow.
And after day 3, I'm like, if something doesn't change, I'm quitting. I'm going back to school. I can't do this.
I'll take my MBA.
It was a horrible way to start a job, but I'll tell you what, it served me well throughout my career. Understanding what the requirements are, not through somebody else's prism, but understanding it yourself makes a difference on how you deliver to that client. So, I finished it, and then I went to my then boss and said, I surely hope you have something more interesting for me to do from here on in, because I'm not sure I can do this.
I worked 4 years for this. Wow.
Exactly. It's like if I wanted to be a lawyer, I'd gone to law school.
So I guess let me back this out a little bit. We're probably on the same situation right now, right? With the COVID happening, jobs are getting really tough. I mean, I know some companies are really hiring, but any tips you would give to some of the people who are hiring today, maybe, or people who are looking for jobs today? I guess what makes you really stand out, maybe? And maybe at that point you didn't know, but looking back, do you think there's anything that helped you out?
Well, I think you have advantages and disadvantages now. Okay. I think the disadvantage is that most screening, especially at entry level, happens through a computer. All right. Yes. You get on an online website and you put information in. Okay. And so that first screening is going to be done by an algorithm and not by a person.
Yep.
And so you have to answer what they are looking for very specifically, and think about the fact that AI is what's going to throw you out of the loop, not a person. Okay. Yeah. So I think answering what they're specifically looking for is real important. However, that being said, all of you that are listening are all active ASCE members, right?
Yay.
That's important. Because if you're active ASCE members, you know people in firms, and you can call them up and say, hey, I'm really looking at this, that, I'm interested in this. What advice can you give me? How do you help me along? For example, if you're working for a big company and they'll have a job number on the posting, right? You could drop them an email and say, hey, I just applied for posting blah, 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 and I think I'd be really good at this job. Is there anything you can do in your side of the system to help me? So if you have those ins at that company because you've met them through ASCE, okay, or wherever you've met them from, ask people. There's a book called The Why Cafe that talks about the fact that you should be able to get anything you want in life by asking 7 people, right? The worst they can say is no.
Yeah, yeah.
And they might say yes, and they might help you along. So understanding that network of people is really important, even if it's just, I'm not going to recommend you or give you, a glowing review if I don't know you. But you know what? If I met you at an ASCE meeting, or I met you at a competition and you were really enthusiastic about what you were doing and you really looked like you cared about what you did, I'm certainly going to put you in the mix. I'm not going to put you at the top of the heap unless I personally know you, but I will certainly put you in the mix because you provided energy that somebody else didn't.
Yeah. I agree. That's absolutely true. And in fact, the way we met, I mean, I cold call you and asked you, hey, Maria, do you mind sharing in our topic? And, to my expectation, you said yes. So you never know sometimes when you just ask the questions. The worst thing you can get is a no, right? So
right.
That's it. Hey, one of our active member here asked a question. I think he was saying that, if you're a same equal ASCE member, did you favor any committee or position over the years, like the stuff that you do before? I was wondering about that.
Well, I got to tell you, I've done a lot of crazy stuff with ASCE. In my career, I call it professional cliff diving. Okay. It's not about, the volunteering. When they say somebody volunteer, everybody steps back and you're the one that didn't move. So you're ahead of everybody else. I mean, I've always volunteered to take on whatever it is that other people don't. Always saying, I really don't know a lot about this. I would like to learn more about it. So if you're willing to give me the chance and provide me some mentoring, I'm absolutely excited about this. Okay. So I can give you a case in point with ASCE. I got onto the board and I was very active in the Regional Younger Member Council at the time. We had a New York State Council, which was basically dealing with licensing and still does licensing issues and with public policy issues in New York State. I was on the then District 1 Council, which was New York and New Jersey. And we kind of, they met, the New Jersey people met like same day the New York people, and then we got together the next day. And so I didn't have a lot of exposure to what happened at national. And when you become a board member, you get assignments. And I asked for assignments because you get asked. I mean, they try to give you what you want, but it depends on if everybody wants one committee, you're not going to get it. And I said, look, I'm looking for things that are game changers for ASCE. And as long as you don't mind that I don't know anything about it, I'm perfectly fine with that. So the 2 committees I was assigned was public communications and publications. Now, publications is about 1/3 of ASCE's income in a given year, right? And we're the biggest publisher of civil engineering information in the world. And so, I says, well, this is great, but I don't know anything about the public. It's a medium-sized publishing house if you look at all of them out there. So I need to learn that. So I went to our staff, our lead at the time, David Dreja, and I said, David, before I even get to my first committee meeting as a member of the committee, I want you to get me whatever data you have and information on what I need to understand about the publishing industry and how we do what we do and how we do better. And really, if there would have been publishing civil engineering book for dummies, that's what I would have got. But I got a lot of different pieces of information that made me more informed when I sat in that committee. And I actually served on that committee 2 3-year terms. I was chair the last year, my first term, and I was chair for 3 years, my second term. So I either did a really lousy job the first time and they figured I needed to learn more, or, based on the fact that I learned about that industry, because the content isn't what's important, it's selling the content that's important. The same thing with public informations. I mean, I didn't know anything about PR. And so I needed to understand more about kind of the primer of how you learn to do that. So I think if there's things that if you want to differentiate yourself, take on the committee that people are having a hard time filling. And there's always one of those. Learn what you need to, and then you go to the head of the class. Because if someone's having a difficult time having that filled and you solve it, you become their hero, right? And so taking on those things that not necessarily the premier attraction stuff, the stuff kind of that is important but difficult, is really a good way. And it's the same thing with project assignments. I've done well here. I really want to stretch and challenge myself. If you help me, I'm willing to take on whatever you're willing to give me.
I like that. That's, if you do things that other people don't like to do, you're probably gonna be doing, maybe not as good as people who knows what to do it, but at least you're doing it. But then you'll get more experience throughout it. So that's really nice. Thank you for sharing that.
I'm going to give you a quick thing, though. The one thing that I have said as I've gotten more senior, that I may be really good at cleaning toilets, but if you make me clean toilets 5 days in a row, then I'm going to question your motives.
Wow.
But you don't want to get the poop duty all the time.
Definitely.
But taking stuff on when others don't is really a good way to differentiate yourself as being a team player.
Nice. Okay, got it. So I guess moving on to that, so when was your first managerial position? This was like the big question everyone keep asking, right? It's now when did you turn over from a regular engineer to manager or supervisor or someone who actually managed people?
All right, so I got my PE as quickly as I could. I took my EIT in college, and then I took my PE. I have to tell you, the son that's the civil engineer that's the ASCE member, I was pregnant with him. I was morning, noon, and night sick, and I took my PE in an active Army National Guard facility. They had Jeeps coming in and out with diesel fumes. I thought I was going to die. My husband would not let me not take it. I'm going, I feel horrible. I don't want to take the exam. He said, look, we bought the exam. Worst that'll happen is you'll fail it. You'll get the experience. You go again. And I passed, and I was thrilled. So once I got my PE, I asked for more responsibility. And so I became a deputy project manager. I was already being a design manager on some things, and became a deputy. And then, we won the next big job, and the project manager moved on to the new job, and I moved into that project manager role. I think you really have to differentiate yourself. So I think the first few years out of school, it's incredibly important that you get as diverse experience as humanly possible. Even if you want to be a structural precast concrete bridge designer all your life, okay? You need to get diverse experience, first of all, to pass your PE, and second of all, so people understand that you're not a one-trick pony.
Yeah.
Once you get that experience, then you need to start paying attention to how all the administrative parts of the project. Even though it's not your responsibility, you want to understand how you're billing, the contract terms and conditions, what's in, what's out. Okay, how you take it to the next step. How do you communicate with the client? Ask people to take you to meetings. The people that, and actually I was totally forgot about this till late in my career. The president of Parsons, when I came back to Parsons after working for the state, was a guy named Mike Johnson, who now is working for Kiewit. But I hired him and mentored him for his first 7 years out of school. And I used to take him to meetings, and he was a planner, and he says, I had no idea why you took me to meetings. And I said, because you need to see the dynamic in the room. We didn't we didn't do email at that point either. But I mean, you need to see the dynamics in the room. You need to understand how people play off each other. You need to understand whether the client is a friendly client or not. How do you manage a less than happy situation? You need to see it and feel it so that you then can apply that knowledge. So if you're an up and comer, you're moving up, you're getting more responsibility, talk to the project manager and say, I really would like to be able to participate. And so you get a better understanding of what happens. The other thing that I learned from my first boss, who passed away probably about 10 years ago, is to follow the money. If you understand the money on a project, you know, the legislative people that got it there, you know, how it goes through the process, you know, transportation, understanding the local transportation improvement process, and then the state and how it all impacts, you are going to have keys to how to get things done that other people don't know. Wow. So if you follow the money and how things get, you know, if it's a pet project, XYZ person, whether they're elected or whether they're an agency person, if it's a project you're working on, you can make a friendship there that will serve you well in the future.
Wow. I really like that. You know, that's a good point you made there. I used to take it for granted. My old boss used to take me to meetings too, and you know, little did I know, young William, 1 year, a couple months in the industry, I fell asleep. Probably not the best idea ever, but you know, now that I look back, I mean, those skills, you know, just interacting with people in the meeting, understanding how a situation when things got worse and stuff like that, it really helped me out. So thank you really for sharing me that, and you know, all the other stuff, obviously. So moving on, probably, you know, in your last phase of development, this is a really sensitive topic, but I really want to bring it out to some people. I know some of our listeners are up there as well too. So the question is really growing up in your career, right? And in an industry which is predominantly, you know, favored by men, right? I mean, all of them are kept by men, and you know, wages
pale, male, and stale.
Yep. So it's probably an obvious question, but I would like to ask it anyway. So have you encountered any hardship along the way, and how did you overcome them? And
I can tell you that it has never been neutral. I would have liked in my career at some point for it to have been neutral. It's either been an advantage or a disadvantage. It's an advantage when somebody wants to fill a quota. It's an advantage when they want to be able to show off because they have a female client. They want to show that, you know, they bring women to the table too. I'm still, for the most part, the best thing I enjoy about when I get out and about is that I don't have to wait for a long line at the ladies' room because it's still pretty much a male-dominated profession. Some parts of the country are better than others. The Northeast is still very male-dominated. The Southwest, for example, I think it's very close to being equal. So I think there's different parts of the country. I've had the gamut, and I can tell you, I'll give you my most shocking story, which actually happened while I was working for Governor Cuomo. I was a direct appointee of his, working for the Thruway Authority. First of all, doing the risk management for both the environmental impact statement and the procurement of the Tappan Zee Bridge replacement as a design build job, and we did not have design build legislation in the state. We went from a notice of intent to a record of decision under a federal NEPA process in 13 months, and concurrently did a design build procurement while getting the legislature to approve design build as a suitable methodology in 14 months. After that was done, I said, look, you know, what other projects, because once we got into design build, they had another team. What's the next thing that you want me to take on? And I got assigned the Peace Bridge in Buffalo because the DEP secretary for transport, you know, you live in Buffalo and you're spending most of your time in New York City. And I live in Albany and I'm spending most of my time in Buffalo. Let's stop driving all over the place. Could you take on this Peace Bridge project that I've been working on to get improvements on the US Plaza side? For 40 years, there had been opposition, some of which was driven by the privately owned bridge in Detroit. By not allowing improvements in Buffalo, it changed the traffic to Detroit, to the Ambassador Bridge. And so spending a little money on a vocal minority stopped most improvements over 40 years. So you had this major crossing with a binational board. Think about that. So you've got both technical and political issues on both sides. We had a city and a village, we had a county and a region, we had a state and a province, and 2 federal governments involved. The chair of the then commission, I was actually it was a 5-5 vote, 5 Canadian, 5 US, and it was a majority rule. So if somebody was man down or woman down during a meeting, the other team got to do what they wanted to and push through in that meeting. So I was everybody's alternate for the governor, except for the attorney general. So if they didn't show up, I sat at the board table. And we were starting, we wanted to basically take this bridge that carries $40 billion of trade a year. It's the second busiest bridge crossing between the US and Canada. And the state of New York and Canada are the 10 largest countries for trade partners. We were starting to make progress because I was given an 18-month time frame. We want a construction project in the ground in 18 months. Go get it. And so the then chair introduced me at an event in Canada as the governor's concubine, which started a whole series of things. Now, I had 2 choices there. I either let it go, and there was like 40 people in the audience that I was introduced to, and they were all senior people in the Canadian US government. And it was not meant as a joke. It absolutely was not. He wanted to own me. And so it was either don't do anything and I let that stand, or I have to call the governor tomorrow because that's just as much on his plate as in mine. And I decided not to let it go because we have to start saying enough is enough. There was all kinds of issues. He ended up having to do sensitivity training and a bunch of other things, but I think it left things in a much better place. But there was a lot of political people that were sniping at the governor for why he was being so tough on the Canadians, because this was not a public thing, right? Because typically harassment, things are sealed. And I actually volunteered and went to the press on this. And I actually did an interview, and, they're like, are you sure you want to do this? This could hurt you in the future. I said, if coming out against harassment in a hostile work environment is going to hurt me in the future, I don't want to work for that company. I don't want to work for that agency. I think it's time to say enough is enough. And so I did. And I had a lot of people that, really shot at me for coming out, but I had many more people said that this is, they've experienced the same with the same individual or with others within the same, and you shouldn't even, whether it's a client or whether it's in your own company or whether it's within an organization, it just shouldn't be tolerated. And so it was a very difficult time. But, having a husband by my side and having a team around me that were, really supportive, it actually was part of a woman's agenda in the state for, harassment anywhere is not going to be tolerated in the workplace.
I agree. Hey, I just want to say thank you for sharing us that. I mean, it's I'm sure it's a hard thing, for everything to happen like that. And I just want to say thank you for, for being strong, being persistent. As a man, we probably never faced this before, but I'm a little lost for words. And it's really important for everyone to know that, this is real. And thank you for showing that. Thank you for showing us the persistence of just, being strong and showing the people that enough is enough. And, you got to fight back what's wrong. And it's important to believe in what you believe on. And this is why we're here in ASCE, right? We're a community supporting other, person, doesn't care whatever you are, where you come from, whatever your background is. We're one engineer, and we're here to support each other. And we support everyone another. So thank you for that. I really appreciate that story. And so moving on to that, and so I guess why ASCE? What really motivates you to stay here, right, in this such organization, right? I mean, it's we talk about a lot of the involvement that you did. You have massive extensive list of participation with ASCE. how important it is to do this, right, outside your day job, right? I mean, I'm sure you're working 60, 70, 80 hours a week on this, and on top of that, you're running for the president, you're running for all the national stuff, Why do so much more work outside your work?
Well, let me tell you, I think whatever your path is in your civil engineering profession, okay, whether it's being, the technical expert, or whether it's to run a portfolio of projects, major projects, Tappan Zee, I was project director on for 2 years, and it's a $4 billion project. There's
Wow.
not many times that you get those kinds of opportunities in life. ASCE has always been part of that. Okay. Especially whether you're a consultant or if you're a leader, whether it's technical or administrative professional, it doesn't matter whether you're on the public side or private side. People expect you to know everything, and technology has just made this much worse because, the pace has gotten so much faster. And so you need to be, to have knowledge on things that you may or may not have. And you need to have trusted advisors. I've been asked before, who my mentor is. And I said, I don't have a mentor. I have hundreds of them. Because of my ASCE involvement and the paths I've crossed, you kind of keep track of who's doing what. And then, you get a specific question, whether it's technical or whether it's administrative or professional or contractual, who wants to be a millionaire? I've got a long list of phone a friend that I can call and say, look, I'm being, and even if there's a non-disclosure, you can talk in very broad terms. This is the challenges in front of me. I'm thinking of a couple of things on how to solve this challenge. What would you do in my shoes? Or these are the thoughts I'm having, poke holes in them. Tell me where I'm missing something, where I'm going to get blindsided. Mm-hmm. So having those relationships, ASCE relationships, it's like a brotherhood, sisterhood kind of thing, okay? Because it's not your day job. You're not being paid for it. Mm-hmm. And so you're there because you want to be. And everybody that's there wants to be there and wants to help each other. So I think it's really important, and I definitely know in my heart of hearts that I would not be where I am in my career today had it not been for my ASCE involvement. It was the differentiator in my career all across. The first time I left a firm, I was being recruited because I was a director for ASCE. I was running a couple conferences as kind of the mistress of ceremonies, keeping things going. Mm-hmm. And the president of URS saw me for a day and a half and said, I need her to work for me, and worked on me for a long time to come join his company. Right. Mm-hmm. So, I think, you kind of get much more comfortable in your own skin. And when it's a little scary, you've got a network of people to call.
Wow. That's really good. I love it. It's, I like the part you said, you just don't have one mentor. It's mentors, right, through your entire career. And these are the brotherhood, the sisterhood, all the people that you can depend on, whatever times you're in, whatever, I guess, non-disclosure you can tell. But, they're the people who's there, right, with the same passion as you are, willing to help you out. And that's truly amazing. And it might not be ASCE, it might be other institute, but what I can tell to other people is get connected. Get connected with where you are and all the society you're in, because, you want to surround yourself with people, as passionate as you are. And that's really important through your career. And so thanks for telling me.
The other thing I'd add, and, I don't want to be the ad for ASCE, but I do. Okay. I've been involved in a lot of organizations over the years, and I am so thankful that the first one that I got actively involved with was ASCE, because I learned Robert Rules of Order. I learned how to manage a process and a product. I learned a lot of things that when I look at other organizations, they're still lacking in. Even over a whole career of working. So whether it be NSPE or ACEC or WTS or ITE, I am very thankful as I look back that the training, whether it was passive or active, because a lot of it was passive. You kind of learn through osmosis, right? That passive training, ASCE has been a great place to do that. And, you look at some of the people that are involved on a national level now. I mean, we had, the now Secretary of Transportation for Nevada as president-elect, or as president with Christina. You've got a senior board member, Roger Millar, who's head of Washington DOT. You've got Marcia Bomar out of Atlanta, who's head of Capital for MARTA. I mean, it's not just private agency heads. You're talking about senior leadership from the public sector as well.
Wow. That's really cool. I didn't know all that. Thank you for sharing us that. And so before we wrapped up with a bunch of other questions from listeners, I really want to get to know, it's a big question of the day, right? How did you get a chance, I guess, how do you become a candidate for the ASCE President-elect, right? I mean, it's ultimately, there's a lot of us here who's already been in the organization for a while, right? And being a governor in our Region 5, right, Georgia, Florida, and other places, that seems really hard for us. And let alone the ASCE President-elect. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey? How did you get there? And, can you give us a tip? And maybe how do we become like you one day?
Yeah, well, I tell you what, I'm going to give you a great example that's current, right? And it's not me, and then I'll talk to me a little bit.
Yep.
Elizabeth Rudis from California, it just was approved by the board this past weekend as a director at large. She's a younger member. She's 6 years out of school. But she actively got involved. She volunteered. I think, if you get involved, and there's always room to find a way. I can tell you from my personal experience, the first time I was very active with younger members and, was really interested in getting externships for college students because I felt woefully inadequate. At that point in time, there were no co-ops. There was no organized way in college to be able to get experience. Okay. And I felt wholly inadequate. Like I told you about reading the spec and oh my God. And then, people laughing at me because at that time you did areas with a planimeter and I didn't even know how to use it. People giving you a hard time because you didn't know the tools of the trade. It's different now because, now a student really knows computing better than probably who they work for. And so there's an advantage there. But so I really worked hard on getting, both paid and unpaid intern and externships for the universities in the area as part of my younger member activity. And so out comes a position to be treasurer because in the section, the way it went at that point in the Buffalo section, you went from to secretary to vice president, president, and then past president. And the turnover in that section was the end of September, just like ASCE's national calendar. That's not the case in all sections. And I was due with my second baby at the end of September. Now, the treasurer has to close up the books and set up the new books. And one of my professors was actually the president at the time. Okay. And he called me and said, would you consider doing treasurer? And I said, I told him, I said, I would love to, but I don't know that I can. I have a 4-year-old at home. I am due to have a baby. I don't know what that brings for my future, right? I mean, if things don't go well, I might be home before, home after. Yeah. You don't know. And he said, if I can get the existing treasurer to be there to be your backup, if either before or after, so through the transition because of the timing, would you consider it? And I said, yes. So he actually talked the existing treasurer into kind of taking it on for a couple extra months and set up the new books and close the old books so that I wouldn't have to be, dealing with a newborn and a 4-year-old and trying to do that. So I think because I was as active as I was as a younger member and doing some programs and helping out with the section in that role, when they looked around, it was like, you know what? She's been really energetic and stuff that she took on herself as well as things we gave her. So they give you a shot. I think you've just, if you try harder, the old Avis commercial, right? We try harder. If you try harder, people will notice. The ASCE is like that. And if they don't, then you go have a conversation with the leadership in that section in that branch or that governor and say, what does it take? Tell me what it takes, because I'm going to do it.
Wow. Okay. I love that mindset. You become passionate, but as passionate as you are, make sure you're connected to the right people, right? I mean, you're gonna make sure that you're gonna stand out and all that, and then you can finally get there. It's such an inspiration story hearing it from yourself. Obviously you're such a key figure. You've done it all. You did all the checklists, and then it's really cool to just know that you're just like any of us, right? I mean, you're just someone like us, as passionate as we are, working really hard trying to get there, and that's really cool to know, especially for younger people like us. So
well, and your employer support is important. If your employer support is there, you can talk to your employer. Who do you know? How do you help me plug in?
Okay, that's awesome. So okay, well, I like that. So lastly, before we go to question and answer, I know we went a little bit overboard, sorry everyone, but so what's next now for you? Well, what's your dream? What's your next goal, right?
Well, I'm treasurer right now of ASCE, and we made some hard decisions over the weekend so that we're retooled for the next step. Future world vision to me is very important, because I think it's not only about what we can be and what we should be, but it's about taking our leadership role back in the constructed project, getting the top 4 financial firms out of that, because they have a very small sliver. We have the spectrum in our experience. So I think that's a real big deal. I am running for president-elect next year. I will have everything officially filed here over the summer. So I really would like to be able to do that, because I really want, the biggest issue ASCE is having right now is not enough younger members and too many life members. All of baby boomers are, that big group is pushing out, and so we really need to re-energize the organization. We need to get many more younger members, and we need the life members to help them do that. So some of the things that I'm looking at is, how do we engage those life members one-on-one with individuals to help them both in their day job and with ASCE to be able to move faster. Unfortunately, the cohort between 35 to 45, maybe it's 32 to 48, maybe it's, but basically that decade, there's not a lot of people there, because a lot of people, we didn't have great enrollments then. B, those big 4 hired a lot of civil engineers, because they would stay between the lines and make big money for those companies. Because unlike the financial majors that wanted to make their $1 million their first year and take all kinds of, risks, if you tell an engineer these are your boundary conditions, they stay there. Yeah. And so now we have a lot of leadership that's retiring and leaving, to do something else or part-time, and not a lot of people being able to step up. So I think the mentorship now has to be more one-on-one, to get somebody that's maybe got 10 years of experience to be acting more like 20. The only way you do that is if you have somebody to help prop you up. And so I've been pushing at that both at my employer and with ASCE, and how do we do that? So I want to be able to see that. I want to see that transition happen well. And then I want to spend a bunch of time traveling and enjoying my family. And I have 3 sons, but I have 2 granddaughters. And so the oldest one's 5, and she takes things apart because she can. So I think there's a budding engineer there.
Hey, that's really amazing. Just looking at the way, we talked about this before, but just looking at the way you tell your next goal, I mean, you're such a noble person. And it's you spend all your time, right, inspiring the next generation. That seems to be the trend of what you're truly passionate about. I talk to a lot of people, and maybe some of them want to become presidents, some want to become directors and stuff like that, but your goal is essentially just to inspire the next generation, younger members, younger engineers, to become better of who they are today. Thank you. You're such a, that's what a true leader are. You care for the next generation, you care for what's upcoming, and you really want to help out what's out there. And that's really cool to know. The people like you are running for our national president, and I'm sure Dennis is an awesome president as well too. And I support everyone who's running, and people just like you. So with that said, thank you so much, essentially, for being in this show. I would like to give some, last 10 minutes of our time just to open up for some question and answer in any case you guys want to ask. Now's your chance if you have any. So I guess meanwhile we're waiting. I think Thomas's one more question before was the one that he can answer was, is there any favorite position you held in your ASCE before? You've been in ASCE for a while, right?
Yeah, you know what? I think of the things that I've done. I really enjoyed and continue to enjoy the report card on America's infrastructure. We did the first one in the 90s, and other societies were angry at us because it was like we were admitting that we screwed up. And it's like, no, we don't fund public infrastructure. We talk about its issues. So setting the report card, being involved with early advocacy in Congress, definitely involved in the state on that. And then I've served on 3 report cards since. I'm on the one this year. One of the things I came up with as we were having a conversation was when they're talking, well, we have to look at this infrastructure stimulus and what's going to be in there and how do we do it? And we got to do a position paper. And we were on a report card call, and I said, why don't we do a report card on COVID's impact? That is a brand Congress understands, state legislatures understand, the media understands. Why would we want to do anything else? Just use the categories and talk about how they've been impacted and how this has set us back even more. And we did that in about a month, and it made a huge impact because everybody's saying this should be in the package. So you've got 100 pieces of paper, but you've got this report card that everybody uses and quotes from the president down to local city council members. They understand it. So that went to the top of the pile. And so now we have a much more leadership position on driving what happens next. So I think that's kind of been a ribbon since the 90s that I've been involved with. And it's been very interesting because it's bringing a better role for the civil engineer at the table.
Nice. I like that. I guess while we're waiting for a couple questions from listeners, I have a question in mind too. I always ask this at the end of the interviews we do. So what wakes you up every morning? Elon Musk said, life is really boring. And so that's why I created a spaceship. That's why I built Tesla. That's why I built SpaceX. It's if I wake up every morning, I drink my coffee, I go to my work, boring. Why would I live life like that? What about you? What wakes you up every morning?
Stepping up to the challenge. How do I do what I'm doing better, faster, cheaper? Being ahead of, I'm very competitive. And how do I do this better, faster, cheaper? How do I take the challenge on and make an impact? If I had to do the same thing day in and day out, it would be horrible. All right. So what's the next challenge and how do I take that on? That to me is very energizing because it uses the best of what it is to be an engineer. Okay. The difference between science and engineering is that engineering is an applied science. Learn the facts, why things do what they do, how they do it, and figure out how to do it better. I laugh. If it's not broke, break it. There's a better way to do it. Mm-hmm. So I think the fact that you can bring that value added, how do you think about things differently? Look at it upside down and see if there's a better way of doing it. So that to me, and sometimes that's about projects, sometimes that's about a standard at ASCE or the report card. Sometimes it's about the public service component. With COVID, I was actually actively involved with setting up testing in New Jersey for people and setting up a field hospital that was then stopped in the middle because, other things had happened. But it was like, people are going to die. And if we're not going to be proactive in our response, maybe I saved one life, maybe 10, maybe 100, but just thinking differently and doing things fast was going to save somebody's life. And so it becomes like an imperative that I've got to bring my best self, even though I'm exhausted because I'm working 20-hour days.
Wow. Okay. I like that. That's your life should be constant self-improvement, constant just self-improving yourself and things you can do better for society. And I really love it. Thank you for sharing us that. All right, one last question for the day before we wrap this
Sure.
up. I think we talked about this earlier, but do you have any thoughts or ideas on outreach to members during this COVID, right, unprecedented time? We can't surely meet each other, and do you have any events that you're doing just fun locally, maybe virtually up there?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what, some of them aren't even local.
Wow.
I'm actually doing an ASCE thing with a whole bunch of us around the country that know each other pretty well. On the 24th, we're doing a virtual wine tasting. So one of the people involved knows a sommelier, and we're getting the same wine sent to everybody, right? And so we're going to do a virtual wine tasting. I'm actually doing a political fundraiser that is done only once a year for a coalition of contractors, consultants, and suppliers that fundamentally runs a political action committee. They only do one fundraiser a year, and you can't do a 600-person fundraiser in COVID times. So we're going to do a virtual beer tasting and have the same thing. That's going to be a regional, so people have one price if they pick up the beer, and one price if it gets sent or delivered to their house, and have the brewmaster, the place that we've had the party at for the last few years, kind of do it. And we're going to do, have a politician do a up to 5 minute about what they're doing in infrastructure, and then we're going to do a beer tasting, and then we're going to do another 5 minutes, and so that we can still move forward with raising money towards this political action committee, and have some fun at the same time, and have open question and answers. So I mean, we've it tends to circle around alcohol. I think that's the I think that's the thread here for some unknown reason. But getting together and doing some things that you want to be able to do, but because of where we're at, we can't. I mean, we're fortunate that we have the internet and the bandwidth that we do to be able to do things like this.
Yeah, I mean, to be able to hold, like you said, I think 3,000 people, right, in one meeting, that's amazing. That's bonkers. And probably couldn't even do that back
We
in
had
the
a Teams meeting in my new firm to launch our new 5-year strategic plan, and it had 3,000 people worldwide. They did 4 calls to cover everyone. And you only had 20 people that had a talking, but you could chat. You could text a chat in, and it was pretty cool, actually. I was amazed.
Nice. All right, one last question. I think Thomas was actually our past president at ASCE, so he's really enthusiastic to hear what you said. So he was asking, so what do you want to leave, I guess, as a potential president, right, now in 2022? Is there any legacy you want to leave, right? Or what's your focus being, accomplished as a president?
And I spoke to this, but I think it's two-part. I think it's really cementing, using for future world vision as the means to an end, and the end is cementing the civil engineer as the leader of the constructed project. It shouldn't be someone that has a narrow scope. The projects now are very complicated, and there's huge elements. It's a system. So I really wanted to get us in a good position for that. And that part of that is advocacy, part of that is financial, part of that is education, but really retaking that leadership role in the construction environment. And also making sure that we have a sustainable organization. Because like I said, we are graying out as an organization. And so we really need more younger members, more students becoming younger members taking more leadership roles. That if we bring those numbers up, if everybody brings one person to the table, that's enough to make a huge impact on the long-term viability of both the profession and ASCE. And so that is very important to me, and using all the things we're doing and focusing them to provide this energy moving forward.
Wow, I love that. We're all here rooting for you, so I'm all for Maria. So thank you so much, essentially, for just sharing us with today, and being such a key figure to our industry, and it's wherever you are, wherever we need your support, we're always here to help, and thank you for being.
I'm a phone call or an email or whatever way, anything I can do to help, please let me know.
Yep, and added her to LinkedIn or something like that. She was more than happy to accept you, and we're one family.
I'll accept you. It's getting harder and harder to stay up with it because there's a lot of it. But yeah, I will get back to you.
So yeah, all right. Well, thank you so much for being here today. So as a recap of what we've done so far in the ASCE Florida section, I just want to give you good things that we're actually doing, and I put up a quick 2-minute video. So feel free to stay or feel free to leave. But essentially, this is what we've done, accomplished throughout the year. And so despite this crazy time, despite things aren't really normal as always, just remember all the good things that we have before, and trust me, it's coming back. And stay positive, stay happy, and just be yourself. Work hard, and go ASCE. So here's the video.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Now this one comes in
Whoops, I keep putting the wrong one.